The sun of New York shone with intensity over the elegant streets of the financial district, where Victoria Sinclair walked with that natural grace that had always attracted looks of admiration and silent envy. Her golden blonde hair moved softly with the breeze, and her sky-blue eyes reflected a tranquility that would soon be put to the test. At 32, Victoria had built a life that many would consider perfect. Married to Richard Vanderbilt, a successful real estate businessman, they lived in a colonial mansion in the Upper East Side, surrounded by gardens that she herself designed with love and dedication. Her 8-year marriage had been, until recently, the example many couples wanted to follow. "Hi, Victoria. Have you seen the new French restaurant that opened on Fifth Avenue?" The singing voice of Catherine Hayes interrupted her thoughts as she approached with that smile Victoria had learned to know since school. Catherine had been her colleague in a traditional school in her hometown before both families moved to New York, following the business opportunities that America offered. Since then, they had maintained a friendship that Victoria believed to be sincere, without suspecting that behind that facade of camaraderie was hidden a sick obsession. "Oh, Catherine, no. I haven't had time to go out much lately," Victoria answered, noticing how her friend was wearing a dress almost identical to the one she had worn last week, just in a different colour. It was a pattern that repeated constantly. Catherine always tried to imitate her style, her way of speaking, even the way she combed her hair. "Then we should go together, don't you think? We could call the guys to join us," suggested Catherine with a smile that didn't reach her green eyes. What Victoria didn't know was that these group outings had been carefully orchestrated by Catherine. Since the school days, when Victoria started going out with Richard, Catherine had felt that pang of envy that turned into obsession. Richard was handsome, charismatic, and above all, he had chosen Victoria. That was something Catherine couldn't stand. "Of course, that sounds great," Victoria agreed, not imagining that those innocent outings had become the perfect setting for her husband and her best friend to weave a web of lies behind her back. That afternoon, while preparing dinner in her large Carrara marble kitchen, Victoria recalled the first days of her relationship with Richard. They had been so young, so in love. He had pursued her for months in college, writing her romantic letters and showing up with flowers at the most unexpected moments. "My beautiful queen," he used to say, "you are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen in my life." But Richard had a flaw that Victoria had ignored in her youth. He was a born conqueror. His ego fed on the looks of feminine admiration, and, although at first he was content with innocent flirting, over the years that need for validation had become more dangerous. When Catherine started giving him looks full of intention during social gatherings, Richard couldn't resist. It was the perfect challenge, his wife's best friend, someone who knew all her secrets, someone who desired him precisely because he belonged to Victoria. The phone rang, interrupting Victoria's memories. It was Richard. "Honey, I'm going to be late again. I have a meeting with very important clients from out of town." He lied shamelessly, while in reality he was heading to the apartment that Catherine had rented specifically for their clandestine meetings. "Again?" Victoria couldn't hide the frustration in her voice. "Richard, it's been 3 weeks since we spent a night together." "I know, my love, but this deal is going to leave us very well financially. I promise the weekend will be just for us." Another lie. That weekend, Catherine had planned a trip to the Hamptons with the excuse of visiting a cousin, and Richard already had his alibi prepared. A supposed golf tournament with his partners. Victoria hung up the phone with a strange feeling in her chest. Lately, Richard had changed. He was showering more often, had completely renewed his wardrobe, and was always with his cell phone in his hand, protecting it as if it were a national treasure. That night, while dining alone in the dining room, which was once filled with laughter and intimate conversations, Victoria felt for the first time the loneliness that was approaching. The walls of her beautiful house were beginning to look like a golden prison, and an inner voice whispered truths that she was not yet ready to hear. On the other side of the city, Richard and Catherine were giving in to their guilty passion, building each meeting on the basis of deceit and betrayal. For Catherine, each kiss was a victory over Victoria. For Richard, each caress fed his sick ego. Neither of them imagined that their castle of lies would soon collapse in the most spectacular way possible. The storm was approaching, and Victoria, without knowing it, was about to face the greatest test of her life, one that would lead her to discover an inner strength that she herself didn't know she had. The mornings in New York had that magical quality that Victoria had learned to love. The sun filtered through the palm trees in her garden, creating patterns of light and shadow that danced on the marble floor of the breakfast room. But lately, not even that natural beauty could ward off the feeling of uneasiness that was growing in her chest like a poisonous plant. "Good morning, Mrs. Sinclair," greeted Teresa, her trusted housekeeper, as she served freshly brewed coffee. "Mr. Vanderbilt isn't having breakfast." "He left early again," Victoria muttered, trying to keep a casual tone. "He says he has a lot of work commitments." Teresa, a wise 50-year-old woman who had worked for rich families all her life, exchanged a knowing look with Victoria. She had seen enough marriages to recognize the alarm signals, but she knew it was not her place to comment. Victoria's cell phone vibrated with a message from Catherine. "Friend, are you coming to yoga class today? I have to tell you something super important." Victoria sighed. Catherine's constant invitations had become more frequent lately, always with that artificial urgency that characterizes those who are hiding something. However, the need for female company led her to accept. "Okay, I'll see you there at 10. The yoga studio was located in an elegant commercial complex in Greenwich, frequented by wives of businessmen and successful professionals. Victoria arrived punctually, as always, and found Catherine already installed on her mat, wearing a branded sports set that, curiously, was very similar to the one Victoria had worn last week. "Victoria, I'm so glad you came." Catherine approached with that exaggerated effusiveness she had perfected as a mask for her guilt. "How is Richard? Lately he seems so busy, the poor thing." It was a seemingly innocent question, but Victoria detected something strange in the tone, a familiarity that shouldn't exist, considering that Catherine saw Richard only at social gatherings. "Yes, very busy," Victoria replied, studying her friend's face. "Why do you ask? Did you see him somewhere?" A microsecond of panic crossed Catherine's eyes before she composed herself. No. I was just asking because David commented that he had seen his car downtown several times, and you know how my husband is with gossip." It was another carefully constructed lie. David, Catherine's husband, was a timid and reserved man who rarely left his accounting office. He would never go around commenting on other men's movements. During the class, Victoria couldn't concentrate on the postures. Her mind was working at full speed, connecting dots that she hadn't wanted to see. Richard's constant nights out, his new obsession with clothes and the gym, the way he avoided her gaze during intimate conversations, and now, Catherine's strange questions. "Hi, Catherine," Victoria said as they headed to the parking lot. "What was that so important thing you wanted to tell me?" Catherine blushed slightly. It was the first time Victoria had seen her genuinely nervous. "Oh yes, well, it's just... David and I are thinking of renovating the house, and I wanted to ask you for the name of your decorator." Another lie. Victoria had decorated her own house without professional help. Catherine knew that perfectly well. That afternoon, Victoria decided to do something she had never done in 8 years of marriage: discreetly search Richard's things. She was not a jealous woman by nature, but the signs had become too obvious to ignore. She started with his office, a room he considered his private sanctuary. Among the business books and real estate magazines, she found something that chilled her, a receipt from an exclusive jewelry store on Fifth Avenue. The date was 2 weeks ago and the amount was considerable. Why would he buy jewelry without telling her? Their anniversary was only in 4 months. With trembling hands, Victoria continued looking. In the inner pocket of one of his suit jackets, she found another receipt, this time from a boutique hotel in downtown New York. A room reserved for Mr. and Mrs. Sinclair, on a date when she had been at home, alone, preparing a romantic dinner that he had cancelled at the last minute because of work. The world began to spin around her. The puzzle pieces fit together, forming an image that was destroying her from the inside. Her husband not only had a lover, but he was taking her around New York, using her last name as if she were his legitimate wife. That night, when Richard got home, close to midnight, smelling of perfume that wasn't hers, Victoria was waiting for him in the living room with a glass of red wine and a serene expression that hid the inner storm. "How was your day, love?" he asked, kissing her on the forehead, with the same naturalness with which he had lied for months. "Interesting," she replied, looking him directly in the eyes. "Very interesting." Richard didn't detect the emotional charge behind that simple word. His arrogance prevented him from imagining that his wife, the sweet and confident woman he had married, could be beginning to unravel his web of lies. "I'm happy to hear that, my queen. I had a very heavy day. Clients are very demanding lately." Victoria nodded in silence, taking a sip of wine while observing the man who had once been the love of her life. At that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. She wouldn't confront Richard yet. She needed more information, more proof, but above all, she needed to prepare emotionally for what was to come. The silent war had begun, and Victoria was determined to win it with dignity. In her secret apartment, Catherine was taking off the pearl necklace that Richard had given her that afternoon, the same one that appeared on the receipt that Victoria had found. Without knowing it, both women were preparing for a battle that would define the rest of their lives, a battle where the truth would be the most powerful weapon. The following days passed like a slow-motion film for Victoria. Every gesture of Richard's, every word of Catherine's, every detail that had previously gone unnoticed now took on a sinister meaning. She had developed an almost supernatural ability to maintain her composure while her inner world was falling apart, piece by piece. "My love, on Saturday I have the golf tournament at the Northwood Golf Club," he announced during breakfast, without lifting his eyes from the newspaper. "Several important businessmen from the hotel sector will be there. It could be very good for business." Victoria smiled with that icy serenity she had perfected. "That's good. And who's going?" The question was seemingly innocent, but Richard became tense. "Oh, well, several acquaintances. Carlos, the Guimarães brothers group. You know, the same people as always." Lie number 1,000. Victoria had discreetly called Carlos the day before, under the pretext of inviting him to dinner, and he had mentioned that he would be out of town all weekend, visiting his mother in Providence. "That sounds perfect, my life. I'll take the opportunity to do some pending things," Victoria replied, while inside she was meticulously planning her next move. That same morning, after Richard went to the office, Victoria visited her friend Maria, a private investigator she had met in college and who now had a prosperous agency in downtown New York. Maria was a shrewd woman with a penetrating gaze who had helped many wives discover painful truths. "Victoria, my love, what a nice surprise." Maria received her in her modern office. "What do I owe the honor of your visit?" "Maria, I need your help." Victoria got straight to the point. "I think Richard is cheating on me, and I need to know for sure." Over the next 40 minutes, Victoria shared all her discoveries. The receipts, the changes in behavior, the lies about the nights out, and her suspicions about Catherine. Catherine Hayes, the blonde who always goes with you to social events. Maria frowned. Ah, Victoria. That woman always gave me a bad impression. I've seen her in several places, acting strangely. Strangely how? Like she was another person, like she was trying to be you, but a cheap version. Those words fell like a hammer on Victoria's heart. A lifetime of friendship since adolescence, and Catherine had been a fraud, an actress playing the role of the best friend while planning her betrayal. I need concrete proof, Maria. I can't act only on suspicion. Give me a week, Maria promised. I'll get you everything you need. The plan was put into practice with military precision. Maria assigned two of her best investigators to discreetly follow both Richard and Catherine. The photos began to arrive via encrypted email from Tuesday. First image, Richard and Catherine having lunch in an Italian restaurant in the Upper East Side, with their hands intertwined over the table like a loving couple. Second image, leaving a boutique hotel in downtown New York together, Catherine wearing exactly the same Chanel bag that Victoria had bought last month. Third image, kissing passionately in the parking lot of a shopping mall, oblivious to the world around them. Each photograph was like a stab, but Victoria studied them with the coldness of a surgeon. Her pain was slowly transforming into something more powerful, a strong determination to regain her dignity and her life. On Friday night, Catherine called her with a honeyed voice. "Victoria, my love, do you want to go shopping tomorrow? David is going to an accounting seminar in Providence, and I'm going to be super bored." Another perfectly synchronized lie. David would be in Providence, yes, but Catherine had planned to spend the weekend in the Hamptons with Richard, in the presidential suite of the hotel where they had booked under false names. "I can't, Catherine. I have plans with my sister," Victoria lied softly. "Ah, what a pity. Well, maybe next time. I love you very much, friend." "Me too," Victoria replied, feeling those words turn into ashes in her mouth. That night, while Richard was packing his golf bag, which actually contained beach and swimwear, Victoria made the most important decision of her life. She would not only confront her unfaithful husband and her false friend, but she would do it in the most spectacular way possible. The annual New York High Society Gala would be in 2 weeks. It was the event of the year, where all the city's elite gathered to show off their status and connections. Victoria knew that neither Richard nor Catherine would dare to miss it. It was too important for their egos and their businesses. What they didn't know was that Victoria had been planning her appearance at that gala for days. It wouldn't just be a confrontation. It would be a declaration of war, a claim to her dignity and the beginning of her new life. Maria gave her a manila envelope full of photographs, documents, and irrefutable evidence of the affair that had already lasted a year. "Victoria," her friend said in a serious voice, "what you're going to see here is going to hurt a lot. Are you sure you want to go ahead?" Victoria took the envelope with steady hands. "More than ever in my life." That night, under the light of her desk lamp, Victoria reviewed every piece of evidence, every detail of the betrayal. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but they were no longer tears of a broken woman. They were tears of liberation, of a woman who finally saw the complete truth and was ready to act. On Saturday, while Richard and Catherine were enjoying their stolen romantic getaway in the Hamptons, Victoria visited the most exclusive salon in the Upper East Side and ordered the most spectacular dress she had ever seen in her life. A cobalt blue design that enhanced her eyes and her figure, a masterpiece that would make her shine like never before. The countdown had begun. In 2 weeks, in the most elegant ballroom in New York, 3 lives would change forever. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in New York shone with the elegance of a European palace. The crystal chandeliers projected golden light over the sea of gala dresses and impeccable tuxedos. The cream of New York society had gathered for the most exclusive event of the year, without suspecting that they would be witnesses to a drama that would be remembered for decades. Victoria observed herself one last time in the mirror in her suite. The cobalt blue dress fit her figure like a second skin, enhancing every curve with sublime elegance. Her blonde hair was tied in a sophisticated French twist, and her blue eyes shone with an intensity she had not shown in months. Around her neck, the diamond necklace that had belonged to her grandmother completed an ensemble that radiated power and dignity. "You look stunning, Mrs. Sinclair," said Teresa, who had insisted on helping her get ready. "It's going to be a very special night." "Yes," Victoria muttered, touching the small golden clutch that contained the most compromising photographs. "Very special." Maria arrived punctually at 7 to accompany her. As a private investigator, she knew the importance of having reliable witnesses at crucial moments. "Are you ready for this?" she asked Victoria as they got into the elegant Mercedes-Benz that would take them to the hotel. "I've been ready my whole life. I just didn't know it," Victoria replied, with a serenity that surprised even Maria. The plan was simple, but devastating. Victoria would make her entrance as she always had. Elegant, smiling, the perfect wife of the successful Richard Vanderbilt. She would greet acquaintances, talk amicably with the other wives of businessmen, and wait for the perfect moment. Richard and Catherine had arrived separately, as they had been doing for the last few months. He looked impeccable in his Italian tuxedo, circulating around the room with that conquering smile that had once made Victoria fall in love. She was wearing a pale pink dress, which was an almost exact copy of the one Victoria had worn at the gala the previous year, but in a different colour. Even on the night of her greatest betrayal, Catherine couldn't help but imitate her victim. "Victoria, my love!" Catherine approached with that false effusiveness that Victoria now recognized as pure acting. "You look divine. That dress looks spectacular on you." "Thank you, Catherine. You also look very familiar," Victoria replied, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Richard joined the group, kissing his wife on the cheek with the same naturalness with which he had been lying for a year. "My beautiful queen," he murmured against her ear. "You are the most beautiful woman at this party." Victoria felt nauseous, but maintained her composure. "How was the golf tournament this weekend?" "Excellent. My life. We won several important clients," Richard lied, without blinking, unaware that Victoria had photographs of him and Catherine in the Hamptons during those same dates. The orchestra began to play, and the couples headed to the dance floor. Victoria watched from her table as Richard invited several ladies to dance, always the perfect gentleman in public, CEO. Catherine moved around the room as if she were the queen of the party, subtly flirting with married men and enjoying the attention. At 10:30, the moment Victoria had been waiting for arrived. The Master of Ceremonies announced the traditional anniversary waltz, where couples would dance according to their years of marriage. "Dear guests, now we invite all married couples to the dance floor. We will start with the newlyweds with less than 1 year." The couples gradually left the floor as more years of marriage were mentioned. When they reached 8 years, Victoria and Richard were among the few couples that remained dancing. "My love," he whispered as he held her in his arms, "thank you for all these wonderful years. You are the love of my life." The words fell like knives on Victoria's heart, but her moment had come. With a grace that surprised even herself, she separated from Richard in the middle of the dance floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria said, her voice clear and strong, calling the attention of the whole ballroom. I would like to share with you something very important on this very special night." A murmur of confusion spread through the room. Richard looked at her with growing panic, and Catherine had turned pale as death. "For 8 years, I believed I was married to an honest and loyal man," Victoria continued, her voice gaining power with every word. "I believed I had a true friend who supported me at all times. Tonight, I want to show you the reality of what happens when you trust the wrong people." With elegant precision, Victoria opened the golden clutch and began to show the photographs that Maria had obtained. The images were projected on the screens in the ballroom, thanks to a technician that Maria had hired discreetly.
"This is my husband, Richard Vanderbilt, on the day he was supposedly at a golf tournament," Victoria announced, while the first photograph showed Richard and Catherine kissing. "And this is my best friend since school, Catherine Hayes, who apparently decided she wanted everything that was mine, including my husband." The ballroom exploded in murmurs of shock and indignation. The cameras of the social photographers began to shoot, capturing every moment of what would become the biggest scandal in New York social history. Richard ran towards Victoria in despair. "Victoria, please! We can talk about this in private. Don't make a scene." "A scene?" Victoria laughed with a crystalline bitterness. "Like the scene you have been making for a year in hotels in New York with my supposed best friend." Catherine tried to escape to the exit, but Maria and 2 of her investigators blocked the way. There was no escape for either of them. "Victoria, please!" Catherine shouted, tears running down her perfectly applied makeup. "I can explain everything to you. It's not what it looks like." "It's not what it looks like?" Victoria showed another photograph where they appeared leaving the hotel with luggage. "Then, what exactly does it look like when my husband and my best friend register as Mr. and Mrs. Vanderbilt in hotels in the city?" The audience began to applaud. The high society women who had been witnesses to many similar betrayals in their social circles recognized Victoria's courage. By publicly exposing the infidelity, instead of suffering it in silence, Richard knelt in front of Victoria, crying desperately. "Forgive me, my love. It was a terrible mistake. She seduced me. You are the love of my life." "That's a lie!" Catherine shouted, completely losing her composure. "He told me he didn't love you anymore, that he was going to divorce you to be with me." The betrayal became even deeper. Not only had they had an affair, but they had planned to completely destroy Victoria's life. With a dignity that left everyone present breathless, Victoria took off her wedding ring and let it fall to the floor next to Richard. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced in a firm voice, "I present to you my ex-husband Richard Vanderbilt and my ex-friend Catherine Hayes. May they enjoy the rest of their lives together, because from this moment on, they are no longer my problem." The ballroom exploded in applause. The women stood up, cheering Victoria as if she were a victorious heroine. The men applauded with respect, recognizing the class and dignity with which she had handled a devastating situation. Victoria walked toward the exit with her head held high, while Richard continued crying on the floor, and Catherine was comforted by a few acquaintances who took pity on her. The night of the truth had ended, but for Victoria a new life was about to begin. 6 months after the scandal that had shaken New York high society, Victoria Sinclair walked through the gardens of the Museum of Art with a confidence that radiated from the deepest part of her being. The morning sun caressed her face, and for the first time in years, she felt completely free. Life after that memorable night had been a whirlwind of changes, but all positive. The videos of the scandal had gone viral on social media, making Victoria a symbol of female dignity and empowerment. Women from all over the country contacted her to thank her for having the courage to publicly expose infidelity, inspiring them to take control of their own lives. "Victoria, here you are." The male voice took her out of her thoughts. She turned to find Julian Hayes, the most respected landscape architect in America, walking toward her with that genuine smile that had slowly conquered her in recent months. Julian was the opposite of Richard. Where her ex-husband was superficial and arrogant, Julian was deep and humble. Where Richard constantly sought the admiration of other women, Julian had eyes only for Victoria. At 35, he was a man who had built his reputation based on genuine talent and solid values. "Sorry for the delay," Julian apologized, kissing her gently on the cheek. "I had a last-minute call about the botanical garden project." "Don't worry," Victoria smiled, feeling that familiar warmth that only Julian could awaken in her. She was enjoying the tranquility. They met 3 months after the scandal, when Victoria decided to completely renovate the gardens of her house as a symbol of her new life. Julian had arrived with a proposal that would not only transform her outdoor space, but would reveal an emotional connection that neither of them had expected. "How is the design of your new office going?" Julian asked as they walked together along the path lined with azaleas. Victoria smiled with pride. After the divorce, she had decided to channel all her energy into something she had always dreamed of, opening her own interior design consultancy. The contacts she had made over the years as the wife of a businessman, combined with her natural talent and the unexpected publicity of the scandal, had resulted in a prosperous business from the first day. "Perfectly. I already have 3 important projects for next month," Victoria replied. "It seems that the women of New York want me to help them renovate their lives along with their homes." Both laughed. Victoria had discovered that she had a natural gift for helping other women find their own identity through design, especially those who, like her, had lost their sense of self in toxic marriages. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, the lives of Richard and Catherine had taken a very different turn. The scandal had ruined Richard's reputation in the New York business world. Clients had cancelled contracts, partners had cut ties, and his real estate company had gone bankrupt in less than 4 months. Catherine, for her part, had lost all her social circles. The high society wives had completely excluded her, and her own marriage to David had collapsed when he discovered the complete truth about the affair. "I don't understand how you could do this to me," David had told her the night he moved out of the apartment they shared. "You not only cheated on Victoria, your supposed best friend, but you cheated on me too." Now, Richard and Catherine lived together in a small apartment in Queens, fighting to rebuild their lives on the ashes of the lies they had built. The passion that had once blinded them had turned into mutual resentment, each one blaming the other for the destruction of their previous lives. "This is all your fault," Catherine would shout at Richard during their constant fights. "You told me you were going to leave Victoria. You promised me a better life. And you told me I was a man who deserved something better than a boring wife," Richard countered. "Look at where we are now." The reality was cruel. They had destroyed everything for an illusion, and now they realized that what they had lost was infinitely more valuable than what they had gained. Back at the museum, Victoria and Julian stopped in front of an exhibition of contemporary paintings. One of the works showed a woman emerging from turbulent waters toward a luminous sky. "Reminds me of you," Julian murmured, gently holding Victoria's hand. She looked at him with those blue eyes that now shone with a renewed light. "Why?" "Because you are the bravest woman I know. Not just anyone has the courage to expose their pain in public to reclaim their dignity." Victoria felt tears of gratitude in her eyes. They were not tears of pain like the ones she had shed for months, but tears of joy for having found someone who truly valued her. "Julian," she said, turning to look at him directly. "There's something I want to tell you. I'm ready to love again." Those words floated in the air like a promise of new beginnings. Julian smiled and kissed her gently, a kiss full of respect, admiration, and genuine love. 2 weeks later, Victoria's phone rang in her new office. It was Richard, his voice broken by desperation. "Victoria, please, I need to talk to you," he pleaded. "I'm ruined. I've lost everything. Catherine and I don't work out. I realized I made the biggest mistake of my life. You were my real life. She was just a fantasy." Victoria listened in silence, feeling a mixture of pity and liberation. The man who had once been able to control his emotions now sounded completely defeated. "Richard," she said in a calm voice, "I'm sorry things didn't work out as you expected with Catherine, but that's no longer my responsibility. Please, Victoria, can we try again? I've changed, I've learned my lesson." "Yes, I'm sure you've learned a lesson," Victoria replied, "but I've also learned mine. I learned that I deserve someone who values me from the first day, not someone who appreciates me only after losing me." There was a painful silence on the other end of the line. "Is there someone else?" Richard asked in a broken voice. Victoria smiled, thinking of Julian and the marriage proposal he had made the night before during a romantic dinner at their favorite restaurant. "Yes," she replied calmly. "There is someone who loves me the way I always deserved to be loved. Victoria, please. Goodbye, Richard. I wish you the best in your new life." Victoria hung up the phone and looked out the window of her office at the bright future that stretched before her. In 3 months, she would marry Julian in an intimate ceremony in the gardens he had designed especially for her. It would be a new beginning, built on solid foundations of mutual respect and true love. That afternoon, while reviewing the plans for her next design project, Victoria reflected on the extraordinary journey she had lived. The betrayal, which she thought would destroy her, had become the force that had set her free. She had lost an unfaithful husband and a false friend, but she had gained something much more valuable: her own identity, her intact dignity, and a true love that valued her for who she really was. The woman who had entered that ballroom 6 months ago was very different from the one who now planned her future with renewed confidence. The first had been a wife who lived to please others. The second was a woman who had learned to value herself. In her small apartment in Queens, Catherine cried as she looked at the photos of Victoria's engagement on social media. The woman who had spent her entire life trying to imitate and surpass her friend finally understood that she had lost something irreplaceable by chasing an illusion. Her obsession had left her with nothing: no marriage, no friends, no self-respect. Richard, sitting in the same apartment, watched the same photos with a mixture of regret and admiration. The woman he had taken for granted for 8 years now shone with a light that he had never known how to appreciate. He realized too late that he had had a diamond in his hands and had traded it for colored glass. But for Victoria, the past was just that, the past. Her future stretched out like a blank canvas, ready to be painted with the brightest colors of her new life. She had learned that true victory was not in revenge, but in the ability to get up, rebuild herself, and find authentic happiness. The traitor had cried in despair, the lover had begged for forgiveness, but the wife had been applauded not only at that luxury party, but in life. And that ovation would continue to resonate in every sure step she took towards her bright future, next to a man who truly deserved her. The story of Victoria Sinclair had become a legend in New York, a reminder that dignity always triumphs over betrayal, and that strong women do not break, they turn into diamonds under pressure. 5 years later, the aroma of American coffee and freshly baked croissants floated through the elegant veranda of the new boutique cafe, Renasa, located in the heart of the Upper East Side. It was a Sunday morning in spring, and Victoria Sinclair, now Victoria Hayes, watched with satisfaction as her latest business project had become the favorite meeting place for the most influential women in New York. Renasa was not just a cafe, it was a symbol. Every corner had been designed by Victoria as a sanctuary for women who were looking to reinvent themselves, overcome crises, or simply find inspiration in an environment that breathed female empowerment. The walls were decorated with photographs of successful women from the community, and in the center, framed in gold, was the cover of Forbes magazine, where Victoria had appeared as the Businesswoman of the Year in America for her chain of design consultancies that now extended to 5 states. "Mummy, can we go to the park now?" The sweet voice of Chloe, her 3-year-old daughter, interrupted her thoughts. The girl was a perfect mix of Victoria's and Julian's features, curly blonde hair like her mother's, but with her father's intense green eyes. "In a little bit, my love," Victoria replied, picking the little girl up in her arms. "Daddy is finishing reviewing the plans for the new garden." Julian appeared from the office at the back of the cafe, carrying rolls of architectural plans, and with that smile that still made Victoria's heart leap with joy after 5 years of marriage. His landscaping company had grown exponentially, in large part thanks to the boost it received after his love story with Victoria became public. Couples from all over the country wanted the man who had healed the broken heart of the bravest woman in America to design the gardens of their houses. "Ready for our family Sunday?" Julian asked, kissing Victoria on the forehead before tickling Chloe, who exploded in crystalline laughter. As they headed to the park, Victoria reflected on how her life had changed in these 5 years. The Gala scandal had become a decisive moment, not only for her, but for thousands of women who had found the courage to face their own situations of emotional abuse or infidelity after seeing her example. Her story had inspired a best-selling book, When the Diamond Shines Brighter, where she related not only the events of that memorable night, but also the process of healing, self-knowledge, and building a new identity. The film rights had been sold to a major Hollywood production company, and soon her story would hit the big screen, played by one of the most respected actresses in the industry. But, beyond the media success, Victoria had channeled her experience into something much more significant. The Renaissance Foundation, a non-profit organization that helped women victims of infidelity and emotional abuse to rebuild their lives. The foundation offered everything from free legal advice to professional training, and had already helped more than 2,000 women throughout the southeastern United States. "Do you know what day it is today?" Julian asked Victoria as they watched Chloe play with other children. "How could I forget?" Victoria smiled. "Exactly 5 years since Richard last called." It was true. Exactly 5 years ago, Richard had made his last desperate attempt to win back Victoria. But a lot had happened since then, and the news that came about her ex-husband and her ex-friend was not exactly encouraging. Richard had tried to rebuild his business life in Chicago, but his reputation had followed him like a shadow. The business circles in the Midwest had heard the story, and no one wanted to do business with a man who had so spectacularly betrayed his wife. He had had 3 different jobs in 5 years, always ending up fired when his employers discovered his identity. His relationship with Catherine had been a disaster from the beginning. The passion that had initially blinded them evaporated when they realized that their love had been built on mutual lies and the forbidden excitement of betrayal. Without the element of secrecy and danger, they discovered that they had absolutely nothing in common. The constant fights had become legendary in their apartment complex until Catherine finally left him to return to her family in San Francisco, completely defeated and with her reputation ruined. Richard now lived alone in a small 1-bedroom apartment in Queens, working as a used car salesman and fighting a depression that antidepressants could not completely control. He had developed a drinking problem that had led to 2 arrests for driving under the influence, and his physical appearance had changed dramatically. The handsome and self-assured man had become a shadow of what he was, with premature grey hair and a constantly lost look. Catherine, in turn, had returned to Los Angeles after her life in New York became unsustainable. Her obsession with Victoria had completely destroyed her. She had lost her husband, David, who was now happily married to a schoolteacher, all her friends, and even the relationship with her own family, who felt ashamed by the international scandal she had caused. In Los Angeles, she had tried to reinvent herself by working in a small clothing boutique, but the social media era does not forgive. The videos of that night at the plaza continued to circulate, and customers who recognized her as the treacherous friend from the viral New York story regularly appeared. The constant humiliation had led her to an almost total isolation, living with her elderly mother and avoiding any type of social life. "Do you feel any pity for them?" Julian asked Victoria as they watched Chloe play. Victoria considered the question carefully. It was something people often asked her in interviews and conferences. "I feel pity for the people they turned into," she finally replied, "but not for the consequences of their decisions. They chose to build their happiness on the destruction of mine. I simply refused to be a victim of their choices." It was an answer that she had perfected over the years, but that came genuinely from her heart. Victoria had made peace with her past in a way that few can. She held no grudges or resentment. She had simply learned to value her own dignity so much that she would never again allow anyone to put her in second place. "Mummy, look how high I can go!" Chloe shouted from the swings, radiating the innate confidence that Victoria hoped her daughter would maintain for life. "Very good, my love," Victoria replied, feeling a wave of gratitude for the life she had built. Her phone vibrated with a message from Maria, her private investigator friend, who now worked as the security director of the Renaissance Foundation. "Victoria, the Netflix documentary crew arrives tomorrow. They want to interview 10 of the women we helped last year for the special they are doing about the foundation. Everything is ready." Victoria smiled. Netflix had decided to make a documentary about the social impact of her story, focusing on how one woman had turned her most painful moment into a force for positive change for thousands of others. The documentary would be called After the Gala, How Dignity Changed Lives, and would premiere next year. That afternoon, while reviewing the plans for her next design project, Victoria reflected on the incredible journey she had lived. She had started as a woman who defined her worth through her marriage and had evolved to become someone who inspired others to find their own inner worth. The woman who had entered that gala 5 years ago with a broken heart had left it as a phoenix, and now, 5 years later, had built a legacy that would last long beyond her own life. That night, Victoria found herself again in her office, but this time writing in her personal diary, a practice she had maintained since the night of the gala. "5 years later, I finally understand that Richard's and Catherine's betrayal was not the end of my love story. It was the prologue of the most important love story, the one I built with myself. I learned to love myself enough not to accept less than I deserve, and that lesson was the most valuable gift I have ever received in life. Today, I look back not with pain, but with gratitude. They gave me freedom without knowing it, and I turned that freedom into purpose. If I could talk to the Victoria of 5 years ago, I would tell her not to fear the uncertain future that is approaching. I would tell her that the strongest woman she will ever know is waiting for her on the other side of the pain." My story went viral not because of the scandal, but because of the hope, and that hope continues to multiply every day in every woman who finds the courage to write her own happy ending. Victoria closed the diary and went to the room where Julian was already waiting for her, reading a story to Chloe before bed. Her family, built on genuine love and mutual respect, was the living proof that happy endings exist for those who have the courage to create them. The legacy of that night at the plaza continued to grow, not as a story of revenge, but as a testimony to the transformative power of dignity, self-love, and the unwavering determination of a woman who refused to be a victim of others' decisions. And somewhere in New York, every time a woman found the courage to value herself, the echo of that ovation continued to resonate, reminding the world that true queens don't need a crown. They shine with their own light.
What do you think of Victoria's journey from a victim to a hero? In your opinion, was her revenge the key to her happiness, or was it the decision to rebuild that truly set her free? Let me know in the comments, and if you were inspired by this story of dignity and strength, please hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs hope, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next story.